we've got a few more signings to dive into.
This offense continues to evolve as the season goes on.
Welcome into Bucs Insider, presented by Hard Rock Bet Sportsbook. Casey Phillips here with Scott Smith and Brianna Dix, and it has come down to this.
Yep.
For all the marbles, as they say, this team is nothing if not dramatic. They love to write it like a TV and movie.
Yes.
And I mean, it has become more complicated, I think, than we originally thought as
Well,
well.
in one hand it's simple, but on the other hand it's a little more complicated.
Yes, it's unfortunately the simplest of if you lose, that's it.
Right.
But if you win,
Yeah.
it doesn't quite have the
like a
certainty
win.
it used to.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Rams. The Rams lost to Atlanta on Monday night, makes this more complicated. Had the Rams won that game, we wouldn't even be talking about this. It would just be whoever wins on Saturday wins the division. Now, that's still true for Carolina, but if the Buccaneers win, now they're tied with Carolina. The previously we were thinking tied with Carolina. We've got the tiebreaker based on common games because the first couple tiebreakers are a tie. But if Atlanta wins and also goes to 8 and 9, now you have a three-way tie. And the first thing they do with a three-way tie to decide a division is head-to-head among all those three teams. So head-to-head with Carolina just wasn't a problem for us because it would be a split. Head-to-head against all those teams, the problem is Carolina swept Atlanta, and they would win on that tiebreaker. So if the Bucs win on Saturday, they're going to be sitting around waiting on Sunday to see if New Orleans can help us out.
we have to
Tyler
root
Shuck
for
has
New
been playing.
Orleans.
That's the hard part. I'm sorry to tell you, you
Miserable.
may be rooting for New Orleans on Sunday.
It's going to feel very counterintuitive as
Yes.
a Bucs fan, but you know what? We got to do what
Well,
we
you
got to
can root
do.
against Kirk Cousins. That's something we feel right about.
That's
isn't
something
it?
that's very
There
true.
we go.
There
Think
you
about
go.
it that way.
Okay, so then now that is the playoff picture. What is the injury picture for this important game?
So on Wednesday, both Tristan Wirfs and Kalijah Cansey were limited participants, and Todd Bowles said they'll monitor their progress throughout the remainder of the week. And then both Anthony Nelson and Jamel Dean did not participate in practice.
Yeah, and we're seeing the Tuesday report there. The Wednesday one isn't out yet, but we know
Yes.
what Bree just told you. Also, Benjamin Morrison popped up on the report this week with a hamstring injury.
Not great.
Didn't practice yesterday. We'll see if he makes progress throughout the week.
Yeah, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the whole DB
Right.
depth and movement and situation a little bit later in the show and what the implications of that are. But then we have another piece of news. This is
It's good
very
and bad.
bittersweet.
Yes.
Gene Deckerhoff, the longtime voice of the Buccaneers and everyone's favorite human amongst us here in the building, has
Treasure.
announced his retirement at the end of this season. If you didn't already need a reason for the Bucs to win Saturday, we got to have more Gene games. And the only way we do that is if they win. 37 seasons. It's unbelievable. It's the third longest tenure in the NFL among play-by-play announcers, and anyone who knows him loves him, and what you hear on the radio is exactly what you get. Just the nicest, kindest person, and we are so excited for him to have his retirement and enjoy it, but he will be deeply, deeply missed, not only on the airwaves, but anywhere that the team is, anyone who's come across him. Just truly one of the kindest and most genuine souls around.
There's whole generations of Buck fans who have grown up listening to his voice
Yep.
the
Yeah.
whole time on the radio. I was sitting at lunch in the lunchroom just a while ago with one of our coworkers who's a lot younger than I am. He's like, I grew up listening to him in my dad's car. And he means a lot to Bucs fans. And when you think of some of the highlights in your head, like Michael Spurlock's first kickoff return touchdown, you think of Gene saying, run, Michael, run, or stuff like
The
that.
old-fashioned way.
Yeah. There it is. The dagger's in. The Bucs are going to win the Super Bowl.
Oh, it's so good.
That pick six by Derek Brooks is, everybody always calls it the dagger because Gene just off the cuff said, there it is, the dagger's in.
So good. Yeah, he's just incredible at what he does.
We're
and
all
a great
huge
guy.
fans.
So very big fans. So again, congrats, Gene. You will definitely be missed for sure. Hopefully he's still going to pop around training camp and some other places to say hi. So all right, let's dive in to this Dolphins game. We wanted to get everybody buttered up with the Gene news before we have to talk about this game. All right, so offensively, I really wanted to talk about Chris Godwin a little bit for one reason. Again, very shameless plug. He was on my show this week, so if you haven't seen that yet,
Seems
check
to
it
be a
out.
trend there.
There's a bit of a trend there on, my choice of who's on
Casey
the show,
wants
and then who I want to talk about on here. So 7 catches, 108 yards, and a touchdown. It was his 43rd career touchdown, and that was his first 100-yard game of the season for him because of injury, of course. And just so excited to see him back and looking really like Chris and how important that is. And you saw, especially that last drive, I mean, that was a lot of Chris. He really, you could see.
He made that drive.
He made that drive happen along with one big play from Jalen McMillan. But to see in those third down situations, those crunch time situations, that Godwin is the guy. And I also on the show, he talked a little bit about that touchdown. he gave some insight that I found fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely.
All the things we have no idea that are happening out on the field. And that was really what stood out to me, was how little we know about what's going on. So let's listen to Chris describe why that touchdown worked well for him.
I learned from a previous mistake. So that play that we ran, I was a very similar play to in the Cardinals game. So in that game, I had like a catch down the left sideline, and then later on that drive in the red zone, it was a similar play around like an in route, and I had thought that I was like second or third in the progression, but based on a certain coverage, I could be first. And so I kind of like was trying to work the defender a little bit more at the top than I needed to. And so when I came out of the break, as soon as I turned my head, the ball was there and like hit me in my arm. I was like, I know that wasn't the ball.
It wasn't time for the ball.
You know, like the ball could not have come to me this quickly. Yeah. And so we were talking about it on the sideline, and they were like, yeah, like when it looks like this, like you go from being like 2 or 3 to like 1, like 1A, 1B. And so I kind of stored that, and we ran a similar play yesterday, and it's a similar coverage. And so I'm like, I'm not gonna make that same mistake again. And so I just like sped up my process, and I expected the ball, and me and Baker were on the same page. So I think that's the best thing about that.
I just thought that was so impressive, and I feel like when you hear about them talking about execution, like what a great example of what that means, and to have a player with the football IQ to learn from a situation and then in the heat of the moment be able to apply it and what you learned from before. Just such a testament to who Chris is, not only, you know, the physical game, but the mental side of it as well.
No matter how much you think you know about football, you don't know everything that's going on out there.
100%. So, and like we mentioned, another huge weapon in that game, Jalen McMillan on that final drive, the game overall, huge moment for him.
Career best performance. His first 100-yard game, had 7 receptions for 114 yards, including the 33-yard catch. He did have the one mental lapse on not touching the interceptor down, but overall just incredible to see him talk about at one point thinking he would potentially be paralyzed, the significant neck injury, to not only come back, but then to have the game that he had, whether it was finding the soft spot in zones or just becoming that go-to for Baker Mayfield. And I think one of the things that he does really well is just throttling up and down on routes, kind of changing the pace. And he's even talked about looking at guys like Kyrie Irving in the NBA, seeing how they do the ball transitions and kind of adding that to some of his release packages, but I think you're seeing the fruition of that on the field.
That's great. All right, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to have more on this Dolphins game when we come back. Welcome back into Bucs Insider. Casey Phillips, Scott Smith, and Bree Dix here. So I know, we talked a little bit about Jalen McMillan, Chris Godwin having really big games. Baker Mayfield, it was an interesting one, of definitely a game of some highs and lows.
346 yards. I think that's his second most this year. A couple touchdown passes. Made some really big time throws. You were talking about how much fun it is to see Chris describe how that play went down. I love when guys, especially quarterbacks, break down things that happen in ways that you didn't realize. And he broke both of his interceptions down. The first one on the deep ball to Jalen McMillan, he needs to throw it a little bit farther and a little bit more to the outside, but it was not a bad decision because Jalen had a step on the guy. The second one in the seam towards the end, when he was trying to get it to Emeka, he correctly read one of the Ashton Davis, one of the defensive backs, rolling back and disguising first and then rolling back into 3 across, cover 3. But so he thought he had that seam open, that window open, but the defensive back made a great play to come off of that and come back into that window. And Baker's explaining how that happens. Says, I just got to make sure that window's more open. So every players are still learning in their 7th, 8th, 9th years, but he ripped off some really good things, and he did throw his 25th touchdown pass, which he's done at least that many in each of his 3 seasons now, and that ties Tom Brady for the most 25 touchdown pass seasons. Think about it. Before 2000, we had 5 individual 25 touchdown pass seasons in franchise history, and now Brady and Mayfield are combined to do it 6 times in a row.
Wow. That's incredible. Well, I know also in terms of this game, another thing of a few highs and lows this year have been special teams.
Yes.
This was another game where some of the things that had been highs weren't. And so tell me a bit about their performance.
Yeah, some miscues. So there was the blocked 55-yard attempt by Chase McLaughlin, which was the first miss from 50-plus yards that he's had. I think made 11 straight. And then over the last 3 games, the Bucs went for all touchbacks on kickoffs, and they had the one miss hit against the Dolphins where they allowed the 47-yard kickoff return to Malik Washington, which led to the field goal. And then for Riley Dixon, he had 1 miss hit on one of the punts, but then he had 2 inside the 20, including 1 at the 4 in the 4th quarter.
Yeah, that was big.
Yeah, and then, I wanted to talk about Yaya Diaby because he is really, was one of the bright spots for this game. And just defensively overall, I know that, maybe he'd want the sack numbers to be higher. He has a team leading 7, but he has consistently been getting to the quarterback, affecting him, and especially the tackle for loss. I just thought the stat was really interesting. He's one of only 7 players for the last 3 seasons with at least 12 tackles for loss. And I mean, the names on the list are, if you were to make a list, if I just said who are the best pass
Myles
rushers,
Garrett probably, right?
It's Myles Garrett, it's people like that.
TJ
And it's,
Watt.
and it's just crazy when you look at the names that he is up there with to know what he's doing from a tackle for loss and also just QB pressures and hits and all of that. And so I'm sure he, really would like to get to kind of that double-digit sack number, but there are still a lot of ways he's affecting this defense and affecting the offense with what he's been doing. So
I'd like to see him get there this week.
yeah,
That would be helpful.
That would be incredibly helpful. So I know also one of the big topics we mentioned was just the DBs and what we're going to do with them this game, and there was an interesting shift and decision with them last game.
Yeah, in the middle of that game, I think it was in the second half, they put in Christian Izien to replace Tyke Smith, trying to get a spark in the secondary. And we've seen Christian give that spark sometimes in the past. He's played so many different roles, right? And he's made big plays in limited playing time a lot of time throughout his 3-year career. So that made sense, and he did have a really nice tackle on Darren Waller right after coming in. Coach Bowles said that Tyke Smith was a little banged up, and he was just off to a rough start. So they made that change to try to get a little bit something different. And I think it went well in that regards. And the Bucs defense was actually pretty good in the second half of that game, allowing just 3 points. But Coach Bowles made it clear the day after the game that Tyke Smith is still the starter.
Yep, which will be interesting, again, based on that injury report. It's going to be interesting to see. All right, we are going to take one more break, and then we're going to look ahead to this ever so important Panthers game we got this weekend. Welcome back into Bucs Insider. Casey Phillips, Scott Smith, and Brianna Dix here. We are going to look ahead to this Panthers game, and I feel like I just said that because we just looked ahead to the Panthers game a couple weeks ago, and it's a very unique situation of how recently you can look at tape and see what these two teams did and what you need to do differently. And one of them I know they're going to want to do is limit Tet McMillan a little bit more. That this last game against them, six catches for 73 yards and a touchdown. He's had an incredible year. He is currently the betting favorite to win the Offensive Rookie of the Year. So, he's had an incredible season and just a very interesting wide receiver prospect for them. They've definitely figured out how to use him. And I know that the number one goal is to stop their run game, but you still got to, now we know that this is a guy that you also are going to need to pay a lot of attention to. And are we going to be able to do that with so many of our DBs now on the injury report of what's your decision you're going to do? Are you going to start Vildor if Dean is out, or are you going to start Parrish on the outside? Are you going to move Izien into the slot? Even Bryce Hall, we haven't seen him really get called up from the practice squad much this year. I just think it's an interesting thing to see what they decide to do, of where I know they don't love making Parrish have to do. He's got enough on his plate just at nickel to then also have to learn so much with the outside. Maybe, I don't know. It's just going to be interesting to see what Todd Bowles decides to do and how that affects.
Could be a couple different things.
Yeah.
I mean, depending on how much they think Benjamin Morrison can go if he's active, they could start one way and then switch up. But did you say that Tet McMillan is the betting favorite?
Yep, and then Tyler Shuck is second.
That's interesting. Do you know who has almost identical stats to Tet McMillan?
Who?
Emeka Egbuka.
Oh, look at that.
And I mean down to the catch, yards, touchdowns, almost identical.
I feel like that's always a sign of when did you do what. Because Tet has had bigger games lately.
The voters
but it's very true that it shows, again, how incredible, and that's going to be a fun battle to watch between the two of them to see how, maybe one of them has a huge game. Maybe that
could swing the tide.
Swing things. So, all right, so Bree, what do you feel like you're focusing on for this game and what the team needs to do?
I think it's going to be limiting the explosives. So the first time around when they met in Week 16, the Bucs defense only allowed 275 yards to the Panthers, but they did give up the 22-yard explosive to Tet McMillan and then the 34-yarder to Jalen Coker. And really that just shifts the momentum. And I think being able to get consistent pressure on Bryce Young, and even though his rushing numbers may not have been crazy on the stat sheet, he was able to, when the Bucs would over pursue, he was able to evade the pressure, step up, and find targets downfield that had led to some of those explosives. So being able to be disciplined and contain him, I think in the pocket is going to be huge.
The touchdown to Jatavian Sanders. I don't know if it's on this reel. Is this it right here? Yeah.
Right.
That was not
impressive.
Any rushing yards, but it was obviously maybe the biggest play of the game. Actually, I would say the touchdown right before halftime, when you only have 12 seconds on the clock and they have no timeouts to give up the long touchdown pass in that situation was, as Coach Todd Bowles said,
Yeah, Bryce Young has
inexcusable.
definitely hit his stride a little bit more this
Yes.
season. So, we both of us kind of talked about things that Carolina's offense did or what we want to see this week. What about in terms of our offense? What do you see being the game plan? And
it's a
focus?
very interesting conversation because the Buccaneers went into, as we found out afterwards, the Buccaneers went into that last game in Carolina with a plan to run the ball around 30 times, because if you looked at what the Panthers have done over the last 2 seasons, if the opponent gets to that mark, then they've lost almost every game. Now, again, don't think that Josh Grizzard or Todd Bowles thought if we get 30 carries, we automatically win the game. As Josh Grizzard explained it, we wanted to earn the right to have 30 carries. So if the running game is working early and you can control the clock, keep their offense off the field, keep the ball moving, have some long drives, and score touchdowns, it would work. And unfortunately, while a lot of that formula did work, we had the one drive that reached the first and goal at the 4, and all we got is a field goal, and then we had the interception at the end of the game, and that's why it didn't work. But so I'm curious, do they come into this game once again wanting to run the ball?
Yeah.
And I think probably the answer is yes. Look at last week. Seattle ran the ball like 36 times for 170 yards and beat them going away.
Yeah. And of course, even if you want to throw the ball more, you have to run to set the passing up. I mean, that's
especially
that's
against
the thing.
this defense.
Yeah, like that's the problem with this league is you can't just do one thing. You can't just mainly run or mainly pass. You got to have both, or the defense going to be able to overcompensate. So they're going to have to run enough even to be able to activate those deep balls and make them.
And I think that's what Buck fans would like to see is, we want to run the ball, but let's have a bit more of a balance than we did last time and utilize those 4 great receivers.
Yeah.
But, a rising tide lifts all boats. If the running game's working early, it will open up opportunities all around.
It's very true. All right, we have one more segment coming up. We'll be right back here on Bucs Insider. Welcome back into Bucs Insider. Casey Phillips, Scott Smith, and Brianna Dix here. So we talked a little bit about the whole playoff situation for what the Bucs need to do to get in. Let's assume they get in. Then what is there of the seeding, who they'd play, where they'd play it?
Yeah. So whoever wins the NFC South is going to be the 4th seed that's locked in. And that means they will play the 5th seed. And that is going to be one of the 3 teams from the NFC West that's already qualified. But it still could be any one of them. As you see here, Seattle is in first, but they play at San Francisco. If San Francisco wins that game, San Francisco will jump up to number 1, and Seattle will become number 5, and they will be playing at either Carolina or Tampa Bay in the first round of the playoffs. Now, if Seattle were to win and the Rams were to win, the Rams would be the 5 seed, and the 49ers would be the 6 seed. But if the Rams were to lose, then the 49ers would be the 5th seed. So as you see, it could be any one of those 3 teams. Probably the one people think is most likely is probably the Seahawks if you consider the 49ers the favorites at home this week.
All right, so we wanted to talk about if there are any milestones to be watching as you get to this point in the season. And you brought up something that I found fascinating.
Yes.
Levante David's tackle stats.
Yeah. How much time we got?
I know, we have 2 minutes for you to give people this rundown here.
Okay, listen. So if you look in the Buccaneers media guide where the career tackles are listed, you'll see Derek Brooks, number 1, career tackles, 2,198. And Levante David, who started this season at 1,600, but is now at 1,708. So there's a pretty good gap there, 1 to 2. However, when Derek Brooks was playing, all teams compiled their tackle statistics because they're not an official statistic. They compiled it using coaches watching the game film as they graded their players. They grade the players, and as they go along, they mark their tackles and any other stats. We took that because the NFL did not compile tackles back then. There were no lists out there of the leading tacklers, so you did your own. And that's how they were recorded during Derek Brooks' career. In 2012, when Greg Schiano got here, Greg Schiano said, we don't want to share our stuff from the coaches, just use the stuff that they compile in the play-by-plays from the press box. And so, you know whose career started in 2012?
Levante David.
Levante David. So for the entirety of Levante David's career, the numbers we have for him come from the in-stadium stat crews. Okay, now you can go back, even though we didn't use them, you can go back and do the same thing for Derek Brooks. And if you look at StatsPass, which is an NFL-sanctioned statistical compilation service, they have Derek Brooks at 1,714 tackles.
A massive difference from what the coaches
and
said.
The Bucs and Levante now at 1,708. So if you use those numbers, Levante could become the Buccaneers' all-time leading tackler with 7 tackles this weekend. So basically, that's what we have for you. There's 2 different lists. You decide who you
pick
think,
which one you
which
think.
one's more valid. And there's a valid argument about which method is a better way, because coaches are taking a really close look at the film.
And they know what's supposed to happen.
But do they maybe give their players a little bit more?
of an edge,
You can see both ways there. So it could go either way. There's the information.
info.
You decide who's the
Do with
Buccaneers
it
all-time
what
winning
you will.
tackler.
Thank you. Beautifully done in exactly 2 minutes. All right, that's going to do it for us here. Enjoy watching that Bucs game this weekend. Have a happy and safe New Year's. We'll see you next week.